Hello and welcome back to Messages from Mars, hosted by Zozimus Agency. We're here with episode 3, bringing our expertise from our fellow Zozies to your ears. My name is David Wilson, and I will be your host. In today's episode, we will be discussing the strategies surrounding AI tools and how they impact business strategies. I'm joined today by my colleague Jake, the VP of Strategy here at Zozimus. Welcome, Jake. How are you doing today?
I'm good, DW. How are you?
I'm doing great, thanks. For anyone in the audience that doesn't know who you are, can you tell them a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name's Jake Garber. I head up our strategy department at Zozimus. Worked at a couple of agencies prior to that. Been in the industry for a little over 20 years. And I think the role has changed a lot in that 20 years. At the beginning, it was primarily focused on how do you help creative teams come up with really great campaigns? And I think as things have shifted and brand building is harder to justify, performance marketing is working very hard and it's easier to justify. And external partners like ourselves are getting tapped to help with more business and marketing. The role has shifted to be not just working with creative teams, but also working with performance teams like yourself. It is working with our internal client partners more, basically helping to identify the right challenges to tackle and then figuring out collectively how best to tackle whatever those problems are.
Yeah, related to that, I was having a lunch yesterday with a partner of ours, and we were talking about the importance in audience research and how that has become much more important than it has in 5 years, right? Which is one of the things you do is sort of we can run these amazing campaigns, but if we're not targeting the right people and the right audience, then our results are not as good as what they do, and that's where strategy comes in.
Yeah, and I will probably get to this when we talk about AI, but I think that is sort of like a pendulum swing where back when I started, it was all audience research. And then 10 years into it, like maybe 10 years ago, it was, we don't need it as much because we can figure it out in market. And I feel like we're starting to see an equilibrium of doing research prior to executing is important. And then the question is, do you need to do the same type of research? And I think the answer is no. And I think that's where AI is really helpful. So do you need to spend hundreds of thousands on focus groups traveling the country? I grew up doing that, and I don't think that that's true anymore. I don't think you need to. Politically, a company might want to, but I don't think it's necessary. So AI, stakeholder interviews, things like that, which we do, we're always advocating for that with our clients. Even doing 5 interviews for 30 minutes with people gives you so much more information to consider. So then when you come up with whatever the campaign is, it's grounded in not just what a client partner's business organization wants, but also whoever it is they're trying to engage.
Sort of leads into the question around, with the rise of AI in the marketplace. So sort of expanding on what you just said is sort of, what other ways do you see and you envision that AI is going to impact business strategy?
Yeah, well, we could start with the question about audience research, since that's just a nice lead in for that.
Yeah.
No one's really talking about it that way. There are some people at LinkedIn that published a really interesting article that is a place they think will be impacted by AI, which I agree with. So if you've ever played around with Bard or ChatGPT, Apple's supposed to be coming out with one, the platform itself doesn't matter. What is pretty incredible is you can ask it a question and you get back an answer instantaneously versus having to search for the same information. So one of the questions I always ask myself is, will people go back once they've experienced it? And I don't think they'll go back to the old way of trying to figure things out on their own, because it's just too easy to get an answer in 5 seconds versus like 30 minutes trying to sort through links and read and all that sort of stuff. Compare that to the metaverse. People seem like they're already going back from that because it's not really solving a problem. It's interesting, but not yet useful. I think AI, when you play with it and you use it and you learn how it can be used, it's very intoxicating. It creates a lot of wonder. And I think it is balanced or offset with the fear of, what does this mean for my job, my friends' jobs, my industry, etc. But when it comes to audience research, what I love about it is it should make it much quicker, much more affordable to get a first draft of an answer for who your audience is. I think at the moment, one of the big limitations all around with this is the accuracy of the information you get.
Mm-hmm.
So I know you and I spend a lot of time verifying everything we find. Let's assume for a second that someone doesn't. I think it's easy to imagine a scenario where you may get the wrong information. You know, my audience should be X when maybe it's X, Y, and Z. So it's too narrow, or it's A, but you know, artificial intelligence tells you it's X, and there's just a big disconnect. So the danger would be trusting it at first blush without verifying it. So that's where it can be very dangerous for businesses, because you take the audience research and then you develop your plans off of that. Our way to grow is this way. The way to go to market is that way. So if you have the wrong foundation, in theory, everything's wrong after that. If you can take the time to verify it, and that's where I think people are still necessary, you get that first draft within 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds. I mean, that's just incredible versus maybe 3 days it would take me to do that prior.
Mm-hmm.
But then you still need to go and verify and gut check everything, because having the wrong foundation is much more harmful than it is helpful. So at the moment, I think for anything, there's still a huge role for people, and it really just gets people going much faster than they could have in the past. So for audience research, if you know how to ask the right questions, you can get really good data very quickly. So if you've ever been to a focus group and you've watched a moderator ask questions, or you've seen a newscast and you see a news reporter asking someone on the street questions, there is absolutely a skill to figuring out what question to ask at what time. I don't think most people have been trained on that. It took me about 8 years to get good at it, right? I don't think it's easy. I think that same sort of skill is often being overlooked because it's so easy to say, we're going to hire for a prompt engineer. And it's just keep putting in questions and questions and questions. If you don't start with the right questions, you'll spend just as much time asking thousands of questions as you would if you did it without AI. So I do think that might be an interesting shift. You see a lot of ethnographers, focus group moderators, et cetera, leveraging AI because they're very good at asking questions to get specific data. So I could see that happening. I think I've certainly used it and asked a question that's not helpful, and it leads me astray. So I think taking a couple steps back and figuring out, what do I already know? Based on that, what do I need to ask to find something new so that I'm pointed in the right direction? That I think it's a skill that's not really being talked about, but I think that will come to fruition over the next 2 years as people start to adopt it more.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of interesting things there. I mean, similar to what you said about that first draft, and you can save 2 to 3 days worth of work and you get it, but it is the first draft. It's the same when I am looking at like SEO content and marketing content, where it's a good start, but it's got to verify for accuracy. It's typically not in the brand voice if we're creating content, right? So if it's a really good starting point, and if it's a 5-day process and we just got 3 days out of it, then the ability to move fast becomes really important, and ChatGPT accelerates that. And we're 7 months into it. That I know ChatGPT's been around longer than that, but for most marketing people, we're 7 months into it. And it makes me wonder, how good that's going to be with ChatGPT 5 and 6, right? A year down the road, will we have to do as much verification, right? Will it be a little further along where now instead of taking 5 days, that takes out the first 4, right? And now the other part. And I think the prompt engineering and the questions is really good. We've actually been doing a side project that you're actually not aware of. And we've had one of our interns putting together a prompt engineering database for us over the summer, and spending an awful lot of time around what is the best prompts to put in there. It's not tell me the target audience for digital marketing agencies, right? That's way too generic. It's really spelling it out exactly what you're looking for, and then be able to use the AI in order to get that. So totally agree with that. Sort of I know that, we've been in client conversations where, they've been bringing up AI, or we've been bringing them up. It's top of mind for a lot of clients at the moment. What advice are you relaying to them when they're asking you about AI, how it's going to impact their business, how you think it's going to impact their business, and them sort of, how do you respond to those questions?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good one that I'm not really sure anyone has the correct answer to, because it's still so new, and it gets woven into the same narrative as the Terminator, right? This machine's going to rise, it's going to supersede people, learn to think on its own, and like it gets very scary when you go down that route. So I think the way I approach it is thinking on more the optimistic terms rather than the worst case scenario, and being fully transparent that nobody knows what's actually going to happen. So from an optimistic standpoint, when talking with clients or neighbors or family members or internal at the agency, like you and I talk, like it's a tool. It's no different than Excel. It's no different than a calculator. It's no different than editing software. The potential of it is astronomical comparatively, but I think it's still a tool right now that people need to use. It doesn't work without people, first engaging it. And then it is only as good as the inputs you put into it. So the data you get out of it. So it's a tool. In that way, I think it is one of the more incredible tools that have happened. It seems like it will be along the same vein as the internet, 20, 30 years ago, and mobile phones when Apple and the iPhone really came out and transformed that industry. And it's that question that I didn't come up with, and I heard on a podcast. So I forget who said it. It was not me, but it's just, will people go back after experiencing it? I don't think they will, because it just makes things so much easier. But I think if you do what's called the neighbor test, and you just go and talk to people who don't work in the industry, most people don't know about this, even though it's been around for a while. I think marketing and some other lines of business get sucked into this. It becomes very insular, and we're so enamored with what we use on a day-to-day basis. Sometimes you forget to extrapolate out and ask, is everyone else doing the same thing? And I don't think they are. I think we're sort of the early adopters in marketing right now, which is awesome. It's a great way to figure out how to use it. I think companies and students in education are doing the same thing as we are. We're all trying to figure out how to use it, but usually with any new technology, it's marketers and teenagers that really sort of lead the charge, right? And there's no cost to it. So it's very open and accessible. It's amazing because it democratizes really quick answers. You hope the validity is good. Sometimes it seems like it's getting better. There's reports coming out that it's getting worse. So, the engineers behind that will figure that out. Eventually it's going to become really good. You have the Khan Academy talking about AI being a personal tutor to every single student in the world. Like, that's an incredible vision if that can happen. Because every student struggles with something, be it math or English or, whatever. To have a personal tutor that can help you is a pretty incredible thing. You always worry, will my job be impacted? Like when the elevator was invented, or the automatic elevator, or farming equipment, like there will be impacts. The hope is that it also creates much more opportunity than it takes away. But I think because it's so new and we've never seen anything like it, no one knows what it will create. And that's where a lot of the hesitation comes in about, what does this mean for me personally, or my industry, or my company? But I remain on the optimistic side that it will, in aggregate, make things much better than having a negative impact.
Yeah, I agree with that. There's a couple of interesting points you made there. One was around, will you go back? And I'm in search all day long. I use Bard almost exclusively now. I rarely go to a search engine result page, just because I can get the answer. And it's close enough that it gives me enough confidence that what I'm getting in is the right thing. And that's from business to something as simple as, I was cooking some fish last week and I wanted a fish recipe, and Bard gave me one. Now, it pulled it obviously from a website that they get no compensation for, and that's a whole other issue. But instead of me having to scroll through 15 recipe websites, I typed in what I was looking for and it just gave me the recipe. And it's like, it's really hard to go back to a Google results page with all of these links on it in order to find that information. So, I think it is here and to stay, and we just keep getting expanding and getting better over time. I definitely agree with that. And and I think, as you were saying, it's not going away. I don't think it's like the metaverse, which sort of got all this publicity, and then people were like, not so sure about it, and then it disappeared. But AI, with all of the implications across not just marketing but all of these other areas, seems to have the potential that it's going to get leveraged from from marketing to hospitals and doctors and medicals and discoveries and things of that nature, that it can really be a powerful tool. I mean, I love the Khan Academy, where everybody has their own personal AI tutor. I mean, that's an incredible vision.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of other use cases that they don't get the publicity, but say you run a call center and for some reason you are not having the results you want. You could, in theory, use AI to help draft a script and then improve that based on your own expertise. That first script you're going to get in 3 seconds based on what you input. Then you input another input and you get a bit of refinement. So what may have taken a week, in theory, you could get done in a couple of hours. Like, that's incredible. What happens to those hours that people used to have to spend on it? Nobody knows yet. What happens to how the internet makes people money as this unfolds is a big question. I think, at the end of the day, you always follow the money, right? Historical search, which still exists and is still very important. You could almost game the system by creating tons of content and doing SEO to rise up in the search rankings. At the moment, AI does not seem to follow that same game. What the game is, nobody quite knows yet. I'm not even sure they know yet. They're trying to figure out how to monetize it. But the results are usually 3 to 5 answers from different sources. So if you're not in that top 5, it's not that you won't be seen. Whereas on search, you could scroll past the fold and play around, even though nobody did. In theory, you could. You're almost invisible, which is very dangerous. So how do you get traffic to websites? How do you get your content out there and get attribution for it, which I think is a big problem right now, right? Who wrote that recipe that you used last week? You probably don't know because they didn't give it to you. They just presented, here's a recipe for whatever it is you're looking for. Yeah. So that will get solved because there's too many people that need to make money for it to go unsolved. But how it will be solved, nobody knows yet. So that's something that is unsettling from like a commerce, industry standpoint, right? Our clients going to be getting the same results. Don't know. Will the results have to change? Nobody knows. So what's dangerous is when you get lots of people coming saying they know exactly what's going to happen all the time. I think what I really love about our approach is we're honest that sometimes nobody knows the answers, but this is what we think will happen. But we're always smart to couch it not being definitive. And if you go on like a LinkedIn, for example, there's lots of people saying, I know exactly how AI is going to change the world. And that's where it gets dangerous, because there are people that are trying to capitalize on the moments of uncertainty. And that doesn't help us. It doesn't help our clients, because at the end of the day, we're trying to help them drive their business. You have to be able to say, I don't know, but I'll find out. And I think we're good at doing that. But I do think there are a lot of people that want to create the illusion of certainty. And that's where it gets really dangerous, because there is no certainty right now. Yeah.
What do you think about the stress that puts on organizations that you can move so much quicker, right? So process, if you go back, you go back 10 years, right? So it's like, you did your audience research, you fly around the country, right? You do all of this stuff. That's a month. It takes you a month to compile it, right? You deliver it to the client. You're going to do a creative brief. Creative's going to take who knows how long, right? But probably at least a month to get something. It's a 3 to 4 month process before you put something in market. With the tools today, I mean, we can take this video, we can upload it, it will get transcribed, which means we can create a blog post today from it, right? We can take it and we can cut the questions into individual snippets that go on social media, and that can go out today. Like, you can move incredibly fast, but most organizations are not set up to move that quickly. So what do you think about this move fast that AI gives you versus sort of the inertia that companies have and sort of that internal battle that we're going to see come between companies that move really fast and ones that just can't adapt because their organization won't allow them to move that fast? Sort of, will they get left behind?
I mean, it's such a good question. I think there are maybe different impacts based on the jobs you're trying to do. So one of the things that works really well with our clients is our performance marketing can literally get going on day one. Like, we can make updates right away. So those clients and we are already able to move exceptionally fast in certain use cases and start to get results exceptionally fast. Like, AI maybe will speed that up a tiny bit, but it's already moving so fast that it's hard to imagine it being that much faster that it would change the paradigm. One of the things that's always been very tricky in the more traditional creative campaign world is getting an assignment to, let's say, make a TV commercial. So you get the brief from the client, you figure out the answer internally, you present some ideas, you pick one, you refine it, you get approval on that, you go find a director and talent, you fly to wherever and you shoot, then you edit it, and then you launch it. And that could take up to 4 months. And that's always been massively frustrating for client partners because the CEO, he or she is often reporting to the street, being like, all right, I will have this thing in market in 2 more cycles, which is a very hard thing to say.
Mm-hmm.
So what AI will be able to do is get that into market potentially in a week. So if you use all the flavors of AI, from copywriting to creative to video editing, to creating or using, creating bespoke backgrounds or using real things, like, you can do it exceptionally fast right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the outcome of that is going to be delayed stress rather than stress up front, because you will move so fast, you're going to feel very confident about it, but you won't know if it's right until it's in market. So the stress is going to come later, being like, well, we got this out in 2 weeks, but now 3 months down the line, we're finding out that maybe it wasn't that good because it looked like everything else, because the algorithms are trained to find the commonality. And using creative as the use case, commonality is not what creative should be. Creative should be something that is interesting enough that grabs your attention. That doesn't mean humor. It doesn't mean using an animated gecko necessarily, but it has to be different enough that you notice it. If AI sort of mashes everything together to find, like, here is the way that every single car commercial looks, then every single car commercial is a car going around a winding turn, and you're like, I don't even know who this is for. Or it didn't show the logo because you didn't tell it to, or it uses a color that you didn't prioritize. Like, there's a lot of danger in how fast it can move, but I don't think you'd see that until down the line. Whereas without AI, the frustration is how long it takes to get stuff out. And so I just think it may just time shift some of the frustration. I think that goes back to sort of, if you use what AI gives you right away, I'd argue it's never going to be that good, because if anyone can ask the same question and anyone can get the same answer, and you use that first answer or the first draft of a video or the first draft of a new logo, etc., it is the result of a commonality in the database. And it probably isn't going to be that good because people probably won't notice it. And that like the attention economy is sort of coming up right now, as it was often overlooked, but it's just as important as it ever was. And people are just talking about it again, where if no one notices you, either because the media placement wasn't that interesting, or the creative wasn't good, even if the media was, or something else, then it doesn't matter how fast you can move. It still needs to engage people. So I think it's like everything, it just comes back to that pendulum. Like, eventually we'll land in the middle. How long that will be, I don't know, because it does become a game of motivations from different entities using it. Do I just want to move fast so I can say I did this thing fast and worry about it later? Do I resist it because it challenges my job? Like, there's a lot of nuance because people are very emotional at the end of the day and they're not always predictable. So it's impossible to say when the middle will sort of arrive at the pendulum, but I would hypothesize as it gets adopted more that we will feel very good at how fast we can move in certain scenarios and maybe not realize it was the wrong thing to do until down the line.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Hey, Jake, this has been great. Really enjoyed this conversation. It's been really insightful. Hopefully our listeners did enjoyed it as much as I did. So thank you so much for joining us today for another episode of Messages from Mars. We'll be bringing you new episodes to you every month. So follow us on Instagram at Zozimus Agency and YouTube for the latest episodes and releases. Comment below if any subjects you'd like our Zoz team to cover, and we'll see you on the next one.